Catherine was a devout Catholic who had been married to Henry for almost 20 years. However, despite their long union, she had been unable to provide him with a male heir, which was a critical requirement for any queen at the time. This situation created a crisis for Henry, who was desperate to secure the Tudor dynasty's future and ensure that his name would live on. The Duke of Norfolk and Thomas Boleyn, Catherine's former friend and father of two daughters, Mary and Anne, saw an opportunity to further their political ambitions by installing Anne as the king's mistress and potential mother of his son. This task was given to Anne, as Mary, the younger sister, just got married. They believed that this move would cement their power and influence at court and secure their family's position for generations to come. However, their plan did not go as expected. When Henry met Anne, he was initially attracted to her, but he soon grew tired of her demanding and manipulative behavior. Moreover, Anne's involvement in a hunting accident that resulted in the king's injury soured their relationship further. In the aftermath of the accident, Henry was nursed back to health by Anne's sister Mary, who was serving as a lady-in-waiting at court. Mary was a beautiful and intelligent woman who quickly won Henry's heart. Despite her recent marriage to William Carey, she found herself drawn to the charismatic king and reciprocated his affections. However, their love affair was fraught with danger, as Henry was still married to Catherine, and any hint of scandal could lead to disastrous consequences. With great reluctance, Mary agreed to accept a position in the court, knowing full well what was expected of her. Separated from her spouse, who was sent away on an assignment by the king, she found herself falling deeper and deeper in love with Henry. Their secret meetings and stolen moments became the talk of the court, and their love affair became one of the most notorious scandals of the Tudor era. Anne was a woman of great intelligence and charisma, but she was also a rebel who chafed against the strictures of her gender and her station in life. Despite her noble birth, she was determined to rise above her circumstances and make her mark on the world. One of Anne's early acts of rebellion was to secretly marry Henry Percy, a betrothed nobleman. Anne confided in her brother George, who in turn told Mary about the elopement. Mary, who was concerned that Anne would ruin her reputation by marrying a nobleman without the king's consent, alerted their father and uncle of the union. The news of Anne's marriage was a blow to her family's ambitions, as they had hoped to marry her off to a more advantageous match. Moreover, the marriage posed a threat to the king's authority, as it implied that Anne was trying to bypass his authority and create her own power base. When confronted by her family, Anne refused to back down. She argued that the marriage had been consummated, and what was done before God could not be undone. However, her defiance only made things worse, and she was exiled to France in disgrace. The experience of being banished from court was a turning point for Anne. It forced her to reassess her goals and ambitions and to think more strategically about her future. She knew that she could not return to England without the king's permission, and that her reputation had been irreparably damaged by the scandal of her secret marriage. However, Anne was not one to give up easily. She was determined to find a way back into the king's favor, and she set about plotting her return. Her exile gave her the time and space to develop her skills as a diplomat and a courtier, and she used these talents to her advantage when she returned to England. After Anne's scandalous secret marriage to Henry Percy and subsequent exile to France, the family's fortunes had taken a downturn. But now they had a new hope. Mary was pregnant. It seemed that the family's political ambitions were about to be realized, as Mary's child would be in line for the throne. However, their hopes were nearly dashed when Mary nearly suffered a miscarriage. She was confined to bed for the remainder of her pregnancy, and the family began to fear the worst. To safeguard their position, the Duke of Norfolk recalled Anne to England. His hope was that she could distract Henry from any potential rivals, particularly the sly and cunning Jane Seymour. Anne was no stranger to seduction, having used her charms to win over men before. But this time, the stakes were higher. Anne embarked on a campaign to seduce Henry, using all her wit and cunning to keep him interested. She revealed herself to be more sophisticated and accomplished than she had been prior to her exile. By withholding her sexual favors, she ensured that the king's interest in her would never wane. She played a game of cat and mouse with Henry, giving him hope of eventually possessing her in exchange for his promise never to bed his wife or speak to her sister again. Anne exacted this promise just after Mary gave birth to the much-anticipated son, making Mary's triumph hollow. The birth of a male heir was the ultimate prize in the Tudor court, and it seemed that the Boleyn family had secured it. But the cost was high. Mary had been relegated to the sidelines, her role reduced to that of a vessel for the child who would one day sit on the throne. Anne had emerged triumphant, but at what cost? Anne's political and religious ambitions are only surpassed by her love for Henry, and she will do whatever it takes to become queen. She seizes the opportunity to convince Henry to break from the Roman Catholic Church when he seeks an annulment from his marriage to Catherine. Despite initial reluctance, Anne's arguments and persistence prove effective, and Henry establishes himself as the supreme governor of the Church of England, granting him the power to grant himself an annulment. However, the path to the throne is not without obstacles. The scandal of Anne's previous marriage to Henry Percy threatens to derail her impending nuptials to the king. Mary, torn between her loyalty to her family and her conscience, ultimately chooses to lie on Anne's behalf and assures Henry that her sister's previous marriage was never consummated. With this issue resolved, Anne and Henry are wed in a lavish ceremony, and she ascends to the throne as the Queen of England. Despite the reconciliation between the sisters, the marriage is not a happy one, and Anne's failure to produce a male heir puts her in a precarious position. As Henry grows more desperate for a son, Anne's enemies at court begin to plot against her, leading to a dramatic downfall that will rock the kingdom to its core. The marriage between Anne and Henry becomes increasingly strained as she fails to provide him with a male heir. Despite the birth of their healthy daughter, Elizabeth, Anne's position as queen becomes precarious when she miscarries their second child, and desperation sets in. In a surprising twist, she unexpectedly seeks the aid of her own brother George in hopes of conceiving a male heir with him, but he ultimately declines to fulfill her request. However, George's wife Jane becomes suspicious after witnessing their close encounter, and her testimony leads to the arrest, trial, and execution of both siblings. Mary returns to court to plead for her sister's life, hoping to convince Henry to spare her. Despite Mary's best efforts, Henry remains resolute and refuses to intercede, setting a dangerous precedent for the future. In a final act of loyalty, Mary promises to take care of Anne's infant daughter, Elizabeth. With her own safety now in question, Mary realizes that her continued presence at court could pose a threat to her life. Henry warns her to never return, as the Boleyn family's disgrace could put her in danger as well. Despite the heartbreak and betrayal, Mary remains steadfast in her loyalty to her sister and niece. She leaves court with a heavy heart, knowing that she has done all she can to fulfill her last promise to Anne. As the final credits roll, we are left to wonder if his obsession with fathering a male heir was truly necessary. As history would later show, his daughter Elizabeth would go on to become one of England's greatest monarchs, reigning for an impressive 45 years. Despite the challenges she faced, Elizabeth proved herself to be a wise and capable ruler, winning the love and loyalty of her people. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all the exciting content coming your way. Are you looking for a heart-wrenching story of a man's journey to find his family? Don't miss out on this gripping video. Check it now.